I think the hardest event was nightland navigation. But this year it was, hey, you're getting dropped off in one of the 4 quadrants, and then you're just going to stay away from roads. You'd get road killed and get a massive penalty if you were within, I think it was 20 meters or 25 meters of a road. So we steered completely clear of roads. And so you're just trudging through the woods. And, this is the second night that you haven't slept for, and you've done, I don't know, 60, 70 miles probably at this point or more sometimes.
Yeah. Smoked.
Yeah. So you're done for, and you're carrying a rucksack the whole time. It's not like you're going out there with a weapon and some snacks and some water. You got a, I don't know, 50, 60 pound ruck maybe with your helmet in there, and you got your huge, super heavy weapon that you're carrying around, and, trudging through the woods and just really, really having a bad time. No light. You're just looking at your compass and keeping a pace counting and trying to find a place that's far away.
No headlamps or anything?
No. You can do a map check with a red lens if you're laying on the ground, but that's it.
Dang.
No white light, no walking with a light on. It's purely, so we were just I slammed my rifle against a tree a couple times. There was lots of cussing, lots of yelling at each other. Maybe not at each other, but just at the woods. We were yelling at the woods.
Welcome back to the Mountain Tough Podcast. We are stoked to see you back listening to these episodes and watching these episodes week after week. It is our goal to bring you inspiring guests that help you live that abundant life. As always, if you haven't, please leave us a review in the podcast store of your choice. Those reviews mean a ton to us. They help get these episodes in front of more people. So if you haven't left a review, please do that. It means the world to us seeing those come through. There's been a lot going on in the lab lately. One of the most exciting things to chat about is the gym on-ramp program. The on-ramp program is designed to get someone off the couch and moving, and we're going to help take that person from beginner to intermediate to elite through the Mountain Tough programming. But this is the first step for someone who wants to train on gym equipment. So when you look across the athlete profiles, a lot of people either prefer to train with minimal gear or they prefer to train on full gear. So this is the full gear option for someone who's looking to get started living that Mountain Tough lifestyle. So if you want to get off the couch and get moving with barbells and squat racks, this is the program for you. So it's a 2-week program to get someone through the on-ramp and get them ready for our gym foundation program. It's a phenomenal way to get started. So if you're looking for a program to get you moving, this is a 3-day-a-week program. So we're not looking for a huge commitment of time, and you won't be crazy sore because we're not crushing you 5 days a week. This is a stepping stone, 3 days a week before you go into gym foundation. A phenomenal way to get started on Mountain Tough if you're interested in gym-based training. Now transitioning to our guest today. Today we have Luke Ebling on the show. This is a very, very fun and exciting story. Luke won the Best Ranger competition this past year, and it is an inspiring story as he won the competition with his teammate the first time they ever went to the competition. So that is extremely, extremely rare. A lot of folks will call the Best Ranger competition the Olympics of the military. This competition is no joke. Think about a very intense Spartan race on steroids. It's 3 days long, no sleep, very little rest for 72 hours, very little food. But in addition to all the physical elements and the mental elements, they also have to go through a lot of tactical marksmanship courses. So they're scored on their physical, their time, but then they also have to shoot well. So people train for years to try to win this thing, and him and his teammate won this thing their first time there. So we dive into what it looked like to do that, how he trained, how the ramp up went for him. He did go to college here in Bozeman at Montana State University. So it's a really cool connection and a phenomenal story. So stand by for my conversation with Luke.
So did you grew up in Colorado?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in Lakewood, suburb of Denver. Yeah, so we were it was perfect because we were kind of right on the right on the foothills. We had Green Mountain right there, which is like a pretty solid, tons of mountain bike trails and hiking trails. So I had that right in our backyard pretty much. And then we had, kind of up towards like Evergreen and some foothills on the west of us.
Did you grow up in a military family?
No.
No, first one.
Yeah, my grandpa was in after World War II for a little bit. He got drafted and was in the Army in Germany for a year or two. But that was it. My dad's a police officer though, so kind of similar, I guess.
Yeah, you have the first responder service mentality.
Yeah.
When did you guys get into climbing when you grew up?
My mom taught at an athletic club when I was growing up, and she'd always put me in daycare, while she was teaching classes or whatever. And I found out there was a climbing wall downstairs and came up with the idea like, hey, maybe I'll just go downstairs instead and they'll let me climb and I don't have to sit here and like watch cartoons or whatever. So that's what I did. And that's what started it.
Like super young age.
Yeah. And then I just like tried to find the best ways to do it. And just did as much as I possibly could. Like I would put my bouldering pad on my back and I had a road bike and I'd like ride down to Morrison, which was like 10, 12 miles from our house. I'd ride down there by myself and go climb for a couple hours, or put my climbing stuff on my back and go ride to a rec center that was nearby, like 15, 20 miles away.
That's awesome.
Go climb for a few hours and ride back.
Are you still doing much climbing?
No, not with two boys.
Yeah.
I'd love to. Like, I think, when we move, probably set up a little something in the garage, but it's just, especially rope climbing or like doing anything with a partner is almost impossible.
Yeah.
With two little ones. Like the most we get is, 45 minutes while we're both like juggling the boys.
Yeah. So just bouldering and stuff for now.
Yeah.
Or indoor.
Yeah. But that's been neat too. Cause it's always been my passion and what I loved. And there's a large time in my life where I felt like I couldn't do without it, but then priorities shift and, I still love it. It's still there, but it's not number one anymore at all.
Yeah. Things change.
Yeah.
So then how'd you wind up at Montana State University?
I didn't want to go to CU or CSU. Like I didn't have anything against it, but everybody that I knew from high school was going to one of the two. And there's a guy in the athletic club that I went to and worked out at. And he was going to Montana State and said it was great. So I went up, visited once. It was the only school I applied to, and that was it.
What'd you major in?
English writing. Yeah. Probably one of the hardest majors at Montana State.
It was tough.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it is what you make it.
Yeah.
Like I loved it and I learned a ton, and I took difficult classes. I think I made it somewhat difficult, but I learned a lot about myself and the world and different ways of thinking. And I think for the career field I'm in now, there's nothing that could have been more applicable. Mm-hmm. Like constant communication, being able to understand where different people come from, how to use, writing or emails or how to format things properly. So it's been super helpful.
Were you climbing and skiing a bunch when you were here?
No, not much. That's one of my big regrets. I wish I would have had a little bit more fun, but I was like so focused on school and ROTC and like making the most out of that I was more focused on that than anything. So I did a little bit, but not as much as I should have.
How'd you get to the decision to sign up for ROTC?
I didn't know what else I was going to do in life. No, I always wanted to be in the military, and I was going to just enlist straight out of high school. And a mentor told me, he's like, hey, just go to school, like do ROTC, don't do ROTC, whatever. Just go get your degree, because then you've got it done with, then you've got some more life experience, and then go join. Mm-hmm. So I went to Montana State. I was a business major for the first semester, had no idea what I wanted to do, but I was like, okay, ROTC will be a good path. Like I'll have a career on the back end. It'll help pay for school. Switched to English after I took one English class. I loved it. And then just focus on ROTC from there. And, the idea was maybe to just stop doing ROTC and enlist afterwards, but got contracted, got a year or two into it and stuck with it.
Was it a good experience for you?
Yeah, it was awesome. I got to do a lot of really neat stuff. I got to go to airborne school while I was in school at Montana State. Got to go to Africa for a month. It there's this program called like cultural language training proficiency, whatever. And a bunch of the other teams, there's like teams assigned to different countries, and they all went to Uzbekistan and like Tanzania and all these really cool places. And they stayed in 5-star hotels and like ate 5-star dinners and went on kayaking excursions and all this stuff. We went to Djibouti and we were at a forward deployed base and just sat in like marine tents the whole time we were there in the desert. Felt like I was on the moon.
That's crazy.
It was like 110 degrees during the day, like 85 at night. It's horrible.
Man, Africa's cool though.
Yeah, it was really neat. I mean, I didn't see much of it, but it was cool. It was like a pretty eye-opening experience. You know, I'd been to Mexico, I'd been to Canada at that point, but I'd never been to Africa. So that was just a totally different perspective. But yeah, it was good. And then I got to do study abroad somewhat through ROTC, somewhat through school. Went to Belgium and lived there for 6 months. And then I think it's kind of what set me up to be where I'm at now. But I got to do a program shadowing an active duty platoon leader. Went out to 2nd Ranger Battalion in Washington and was there for a couple weeks with them. That was a great, but also eye-opening experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The whole time through ROTC and MSU, were you leaning hard into fitness?
Yeah. I mean, it's always been a part of my life. You know, my mom being a fitness instructor all growing up. And I don't know why, I've just always enjoyed it, like especially doing fitness by myself, whether it's, you know, I was like young and riding a bike or going for a run or like packing as heavy of a ruck as I could and like walking up Green Mountain or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then just kind of like found ways to channel it. I never played football in my life, and I decided to play senior year of high school because all my buddies were doing it. Yeah. And I wanted to hang out with my buddies. So, I mean, like for the record, I was horrendous. I was absolutely awful at football, but I was pretty scrawny too. So I knew the only way that I would have like any luck at all was to start working out. So I lifted a bunch, and that was like a way to kind of channel it, you know? So that's what probably started most of it.
So do you think most of your lifting started in that high school age?
Yeah, totally. Because I wanted to get bigger for football, and I went from like 165 to 185, which still on a 6'2" frame isn't much.
Packed on some muscle though.
Yeah, for what it was.
And then with ROTC, towards the end of college, you have to make that decision if you're going guard or active, right? Mm-hmm. And then ROTC they pay for your college after you make that agreement. Is it a 6-year agreement?
Yeah, it's 4 years. 4 years active, or I don't know what the guard one is necessarily, but it's 4 years active, and then you're on the inactive ready reserves for another 2 years.
And did you know right away you were going active?
No, my plan was to go guard and go to grad school for rhetoric and composition. But then as I thought about it, I'm like, man, I don't want to continue being a broke college student. Mm-hmm. I can go into the military and do that for a couple of years and then go to grad school after that, or get out or continue with it or whatever.
And so how did you wind up at Ranger Regiment from there?
Yeah, kind of like a backwards, strange way to get there. But you kind of choose your branch. So obviously within the Army, there's different branches: infantry, field artillery, logistics, a whole plethora of things. And I got a sub branch of logistics, which is called ordnance. So it's EOD, munitions, and then maintenance. And the only thing I wanted to do in life was be a special forces guy. So I was like, in my mind, EOD is the closest thing you can get to being special forces, because you can't go to SFAS right out of the gate. So I put all my chips on that one. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be an EOD guy. And I got like the little branch insignia when they told us like, hey, congratulations, this is what your branch is. And everybody got infantry, and they were all pumped up. And I went in there, and they're like, hey, you got ordnance. I was like, sweet. And this was on my birthday too.
Sweet.
I was like, sweet. I got EOD. And they're like, no, you just got ordnance. Like, you're not going to be an EOD guy. There's no way. Like, you're going to be doing logistics.
Dang.
And at that point, it sounded like the worst thing that I possibly could have imagined. I went out and I hucked that branch insignia across the parking lot.
Just frustrated.
Oh, I was so frustrated. I got in the truck and just like pounding on the steering wheel.
Oh,
and I actually had a pretty bad attitude about it through like my basic officer course, and showed up in Alaska. The other thing is I was trying to go to Fort Lewis, Washington. So a girl I was dating at the time was going to go to nursing school there, and we broke up right around that time. And then I went to Alaska, but it was like, I mean, looking back now, it was perfect. Like I couldn't imagine a better situation. It's funny how like things fall into place like that.
Yeah, things work out.
Yeah, but went up there for 2 years. I was in a logistics unit, and I showed up and I still kind of had a bad attitude. And then I realized like, hey, I'm going to be, you know, you're leading with a platoon sergeant, with a senior enlisted advisor, but you know, as a platoon leader and as a leader, it's like, what am I going to give these guys? Am I going to give them shit and just show up every day with a bad attitude, or am I going to try to make it, you know, the best that I possibly can? And that was when I kind of flipped the switch and decided to try to apply myself. I was with them for 2 years. It was a great experience. I love those dudes to death. We made a lot of progress. We had a lot of fun. And then I didn't have a Ranger tab at that point. I hadn't gone to school. So I was like knocking down 75th Ranger Regiment's door because I knew I wanted something better or something more challenging, really. And like, hey, you don't have a Ranger tab. Like, we have all these other dudes with Ranger tabs, you know.
Yep.
Go try somewhere else, go to school. And I didn't have the opportunity to go for my unit at that point. Finally, somehow the opportunity opened up for me. Got to go to selection, made it through, and then went to regimental headquarters and was on a staff with no Ranger tab, where I would say 98% of officers that come to the Ranger Regiment have Ranger tabs. So
man,
kind of like a little underdog mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was selection?
So we run a really professional and amazing selection assessment. It's fantastic. There's RASP 1, which is for enlisted guys, and that's a little bit longer. But the officer one is 3 weeks generally. And so they'll do, you know, you do your physical events, you'll do a couple things where you get tested in the field, and then you ultimately kind of culminate at a board where you're, you know, they're kind of poking and prodding to see what kind of leader you are, what kind of person you are, how you're going to act in difficult situations. But the whole experience is unbelievably professional. I mean, the NCOs that we have across the board, the non-commissioned officers, are, I would say, the best in the military by far. And so the guys that run the selection, the assessment are just the same, unbelievably professional. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then all the guys that you interact with the board are, you know, battalion commanders or higher, battalion sergeant majors. So getting to interact with them and just, you know, you learn a lot about yourself and being a leader and things you did well, things you didn't do well. You also get a really neat opportunity to go do some shooting, and you do like a little CQB and stuff like that, which is really cool because, you know, one, they can see your trainability, because obviously it's you could be a stud wherever you go, wherever you come from, but coming to the regiment, it's like, hey, everybody's a golden boy.
Are you coachable though?
Yeah. Are you coachable though? Are you willing to like put the ego aside, you know, have some humility and listen to a Ranger NCO? Because ultimately when you show up, like, that's going to be who's teaching you, who's instructing you, who's like helping you make the right calls along the way. So
you were there, but you still needed to go to Ranger school to get your tab, right?
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
Another like roundabout kind of way, but you know, we were talking about it last night. Came back and Hannah found out during board week she was 4 months pregnant. We were dating at the time. Total surprise. So that was like quite a bit of a whirlwind. She's like, hey, I'm 4 months pregnant, you know, but still plan on moving to Georgia with you and, you know, like making a life with you. I proposed to her like 2 or 3 weeks later, and we got married in the courthouse the next day.
Man.
Yeah. So that was pretty quick. I proposed to her on top of like a multi-pitch climb. I don't think she could have been any more mad at me.
Really?
Yeah, because I had like remembered it. I'd done it years prior, and I'd remembered it being kind of easy. and then I started climbing. I was like, man, this is not easy at all.
It's
like
a
I don't
tough
know
climb.
what I thought I was getting into. And so I make it up, and she was just having a bad time. She's like, hey, let's go down. And I'm like, no, we're going to keep going. And usually that's because like I want to, but in this situation, it's like, no, I have this plan. I don't want to like plan the whole thing out again.
Proposal plan.
Yeah. And at the top, she took a little bit of a fall, and the rope was over this ledge, and kind of, she like swung to the side and got wrapped around, and, just shook her up a little bit. And so she came up there, and she's like pretty emotional, and I've got like the ring in my bag and stuff, or I had the ring like slung across my chest in a little like bag and had it all ready to go. And I like shoved it back in my bag. I was like, man, I'm gonna have to, like, this is the worst time to do
timing.
it. Yeah. But then I thought, you know what, like what other time? And we're going to remember, it's a good story. So I dropped down on one knee, proposed to her, and she was like, and there's in the picture, she's like pretty teary eyed. People are like, man, that's so sweet that you're so emotional about the proposal. She's like, that's not what I was emotional about.
It's about this nightmare climb.
Yeah. So yeah, we got married, kind of shotgun wedding to say the least. And then, had Emmett, a couple months later, showed up. I told the boss, I was like, hey, I'm ready to go to Ranger school. Like, send me now. And he's like, no, dude, your wife's 5 months pregnant now. Like, not going to happen. So I stuck around for a couple months, which was, like adds to kind of the underdog mentality, adds to the, having to kind of prove yourself.
Yeah.
And then went to Ranger school and made it straight through, luckily, by the grace of God, skin of my teeth.
Yeah.
Graduated, and they sent me down to 3rd Ranger Battalion, which has been amazing. I mean, it's all been an amazing experience, but
Was Ranger school just a smoker?
not really. It's like, if you can do the basic physical stuff, the first week's pretty physically intensive. You've got your 12-mile road march. You've got your fitness test. Like they kind of have changed it a little bit with the ACFT. So I don't know exactly what they're doing now, but generally push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, 5-mile run. If you can make it through that, it's just a slog fest. Like there's nothing tough really about carrying a 60-pound ruck going half a mile an hour through the woods for hours on end, but
Just a mental grind.
yeah, for sure.
What about the food? Was it like starvation?
Yeah, that was the toughest part for me. I thought the sleep was going to be, I was like, man, I can do without food all day, but sleep's going to get me. I was like, man, I'd trade sleep for food any day.
Oh, man.
I was like licking the inside of MRE wrappers.
Just looking for more calories.
I actually found, we were like doing a little patrol, right? And we were like walking through this like waist high grass, and I looked down. This was in mountains in Dahlonega, and I looked down and I see this Easter egg. And I was like, I thought I was having like some kind of vision or something. I see this Easter egg and I pop it in my pocket. I'm like looking around to make sure there's no instructors around. I pop it in my pocket. We get back to the patrol base, and I'm sitting next to my buddy. I'm like, hey man, guess I have an Easter egg in my pocket. And he's like, dude, you're high. You're out of your mind. Like you're having
Hallucinations.
You're having hallucinations. Cause like we call it seeing the wizard.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, dude, I'm not. I pulled out and it's full of candy. I'm not even kidding you.
Like one of those plastic ones.
Yeah. And it's full of like jelly beans. And we just chowed down on jelly beans. And that was the best day at Ranger school.
It like fell out of the sky or something.
Yeah. I hope they don't like take my Ranger tab because I said that.
They might, yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
Some kid just chucked it out there.
Yeah. I mean, some kid that was thinking of me, I guess. I don't know.
So then what happened after that? You're back after school.
Yeah. So I was back. Hannah had taken care of Emmett for 3 months by herself. I came back for like 2-3 weeks and then went on a deployment, which, to me is like, hey, that's the thing you came here to do. That's the most exciting thing in the world. For Hannah, probably not so much. It's like another couple months with a little one. But that was a great experience. I learned a lot again, like just, it was predominantly I was working with one other Ranger NCO. And the two of us were doing a lot of logistics stuff. So that was, just getting to learn from him and garnish insight and maturity and wisdom from him was great experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And when did you start hearing rumors or getting interested and excited about this Best Ranger competition?
Yeah, I heard about it. There's a guy, Mike Rose, who's won it 3 times, and he was in my RASP class. And I mean, I hope he's not listening to this, but I beat him on the 5-mile run. And I beat him on the RPAT. The RPAT's like you're in kit and boots and helmet. You do 2 miles, you come back, you do like a rope, a ladder, climb over a wall, you drag a Sketco, do a sprint, which is really like a walk, and then you do another mile and come back. I beat him in that too. And so I was like, and I knew he'd won it 3 times. So I was like, man, maybe I'm capable of it. I don't even have a Ranger tab at this point or anything.
And he's kind of a legend, isn't he?
He's a total legend. He's got like some screws loose, I think. But yeah, he's an absolute freak. He won it for the first time as a brand new second lieutenant. There's very few, I think we were either the second or the third team that's ever done it, with having 2 guys that have never competed before. And him and Bergman had done that same thing in, I think, 2016 or something like that.
First time at the competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be super rare.
Yeah. I think it's no different than, like, at least the physical aspect, it's no different than doing an ultra or, even a marathon, right? It's like you don't know the pace, you don't know the RPEs that you should be hitting to not burn yourself out, to go for a long duration. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what a lot of guys come into the competition with, haven't done it before. I think that's one of the biggest things, but also just the strategy and understanding the kind of give and take, but also how you're going to work with your partner. Cause you're not all going to be 100% of the time for 3 days straight.
Yeah. So did Mike start kind of mentoring you on getting signed up, or how does the regiment decide they're sending you guys? Yeah.
So, maybe like this is the way he started mentoring me, but we did this like really terrible kind of exercise where you're just like carrying a lot of weight. You're having a really bad time for a day or 2 straight. And it's like the middle of the night, everybody's broken off, and he's like, "Hey, who hasn't gone to Ranger school here?" And he looks right at me. I was like, "Man, this sucks. I still need to go to Ranger school. Like,
jeez,
I'm in the thick of it, and I still need to like do the, a crappy thing."
Yeah.
But yeah, I came back and, I was just focused on like doing the job and getting integrated into 375. And then there's like some kind of rumors of, hey, you're a somewhat fit dude. Like maybe you could have the opportunity and do okay and like do the train up. Didn't work out. Like the organization, the company that I was in, we lost all our officers just because they were moving on to other assignments. And so I didn't want to leave them high and dry. And, I came there to do a job, not to do competition. So did that job for, about 2 years, a little over a year and a half. And then got the opportunity from there to do Best Ranger competition. Cause we had a Sergeant Major Masters, our 3rd Battalion Command Sergeant Major. He told my commander, and then he told the battalion commanders like, "Hey, Luke's doing BRC. Like, I don't want to hear any ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, he's doing BRC."
And so they just sent you.
Yeah. So I was originally supposed to get out of the military like around that time, and kind of begged and pleaded with Hannah. I'm like, "Hey, can I get one last hurrah to do this thing?" And got to go out and do it. And it was awesome.
How'd you decide on who your partner was going to be?
So they kind of decide. I got really unlucky in that aspect. No, I'm just kidding. In some aspects, I'm not kidding at all. But they kind of decide. So each battalion will send so many people to regiment, and then a regiment holds a formal training it's about 4.5 months for the competition. And throughout that, they're kind of assessing and looking at who's weak and strong at what, and really you want 2 guys who are pretty evenly matched physically. Because if you're on the night road march and, I can ruck an hour 30 and you can ruck a 2:25, like we're just not going to have a good time. So I'm going to be pulling you the whole time. You're going to be maxed out, or I'm going to be carrying your weight or whatever. Right. And so I was very unlucky to be matched with the guy who holds the Army 12-mile ruck record. And
jeez,
he runs like 27-minute 5 mile, and he's just like a freak. And me and my crows looked at him after like a couple weeks of the train up and after like the formal tryout, and we go, "Hey man, what's your program? What are you doing? Like how are you where you're at?" He goes, "Oh, I play beer league hockey and I run, 15 miles a week."
He's a younger guy too.
Yeah, he's 25. He's working on his master's degree. I mean, he speaks, like, he might be an insider threat. I think he speaks like Russian, a little bit of Chinese, he's just kind of a savant. He's one of those people that he picks something up and he's amazing at it. You know?
Just no matter what.
Yeah. So I got lucky enough to be placed with him, but also unlucky because he's one of the most competitive people I've ever met and, pushes himself really hard. So a lot of times that looked like pushing me really hard. I think I'm hard on myself, but generally my training style is a little bit more laid back, and I kind of want to, stay a little bit loose and, like get in more into a flow state than into like a focused, intensive state where he's all about the intensity. So we had a couple shouting matches at, one point or the other.
That's awesome.
Not during the competition, but during the train up.
Yeah. And it was his first time ever too, right?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So hopefully he goes back and wins it one or two more times.
Yeah.
I'm sure if he wants to, he will.
And so you're kind of able to pick whoever you want for your teammate.
Yeah. So the organization, a lot of other units, they'll get kind of the pick of the litter and who they want to choose. And some of them, like we were talking about, they've only got 2 or 4 Ranger qualified dudes. So that's how it evens
rolls
itself out. Yeah. But for us, obviously, 70, 80, maybe 90% of the Ranger regiment's Ranger qualified, probably more. So you got a ton of Ranger qualified dudes, a ton of really fit guys, and then they get put into the train up. And then the coaches have the largest say over who your partner is, but you get some say to some extent. If you absolutely can't work with a dude, they're not going to pair you up with him. But for the most part, they're looking to see who's going to be a good fit. And I think there's, on the surface, I would say it's all about physicality and who's evenly matched. But I think under that, there's a lot of wisdom on the coach's behalf. Nick O'Brien's been coaching it for, 10 or more years. So they've seen a lot of different teams, a lot of different Rangers coming through the organization, through the competition. So they kind of know, who's going to do what at what time and can pair people together properly.
We should break down the competition a little bit just so the listeners know how big of a deal it is in the Army and nationally and globally too. So can you break down BRC and what it is, how long it's been around?
Yeah. I hope I'm somewhat on my facts. I'm not going to say any exact numbers, but it's been going on since the 80s. It kind of started as a competition amongst the Ranger departments. So the guys that were training, Ranger qualifying people in the 80s, their commander said, "Hey, we're going to go and figure out who's the best buddy team amongst everybody," just as an internal competition to build a esprit de corps, make the unit a little bit better. So that's how it started. And then it caught kind of some steam as other units started to see it and said, "Hey, can we send a guy to you guys' competition and see how he does?" And then since then it's just grown and grown. And I think kind of in the early 2000s, like late 90s, early 2000s, it really caught a lot of steam. And, they might feature on ESPN, or I think Fox News did a special on it. And it's gained some media attention kind of over the years. And I think now, especially that, deployments have slowed down a lot, the military and the Army especially is really focused on competitions. And that's how you're going to get better without deployments, is that mentality of iron sharpens iron, and kind of put everybody in the arena and see how they fare. And because you're going to get really qualified leaders that come out of that and go back to their units and they've been through something that's really difficult and really arduous, and they've trained up to do it. And so, that focus and that capability to have a plan, train up for it, and go compete, I think is huge. And you just get to rub shoulders with a lot of really good people that are focused, and everybody's there to compete and do their best and suffer a little bit.
How many teams show up?
Yeah. So back to the competition a little bit, there's 50. This year there's 56 teams. So they had a little bit, it was a little bit more competitive, a couple more teams. It's 3 days. So pretty much nonstop. There's no scheduled rest. You might get lucky and finish an event early and get, maybe an hour of sleep on the ground or shut your eyes for 15 minutes. But really there's no scheduled sleep time. There's no scheduled eating time. There's no, hey, go brush your teeth and go use the bathroom and have 10 minutes to yourself. It's nonstop, one event to the next. So the only times you get some rest is before mass start events, which would be the very first event, the night road march, night land navigation the second night, and then the final buddy run at the end of day 3. So it's a 3-day competition. You do, depending on the year, you do anywhere between 80 and sometimes 100 or more miles. Kind of depending on how you do in land navigation, some other things.
With a lot of rucks on those miles too.
Almost all of that is, I would almost be willing to say that all of that is loaded. There's a couple miles here and there that aren't, but almost every single mile is either a ruck or, a sandbag or, a kit, or going through an obstacle course or something. So it's not like, hey, I'm going to go out and run 100 miles or 110 miles. It's like, no, you're going to do it with a ruck on your back and boots on your feet and a weapon in your hand. And we have these things called rubber duckies.
Yeah.
There's like a rubber M16 or whatever. I don't know where they get these things for BRC, but like, I swear they're like tungsten infused or something. I feel like they're 20, 25 pounds. They're awful. Yeah. Heaviest thing I've ever carried. Like I'd rather carry a 25-pound plate around the whole time.
Man. And this year, like 56 teams showed up. How many teams finished?
Yeah. So 16 teams finish every year. And this year they did a cut in the morning. I'm not totally clear when they did the cut, but they cut a couple teams in the morning after first couple events. But generally when you start with 50 teams, they'll do a cut down to 36 after the night road march going into night stakes. Night stakes is just, doing kind of more technical and tactical kind of proficiency things, maybe some physical stuff mixed into it. A lot of cognitive kind of based stuff for that after you've been smoked the whole day. They'll make a cut there before night stakes. They'll make a cut after night land navigation the second night down to 16, and then 16 teams finish the competition. And this year it was pretty arduous. So from my understanding, they didn't have to cut anybody minus that first initial cut.
People are dropping out.
There's enough people dropping out or not making the time standards during the night road march and night land navigation and whatnot to continue on. So they didn't have to do any difficult cuts this year.
Man, how many of the guys there did you already know just from train up?
So since I'm not an infantry officer, I'm a logistics officer, I probably know like on maybe one hand how many infantry or how many logistics officers have ranger tabs, that are in like my kind of cohort. But for these infantry guys, they all go through the same pipeline. They all go to ranger school. So a lot of those infantry guys, they'll show up and know, 10 of my buddies that I went to ranger school with or IBOLIC with or whatever, they're like basic officer course. But for me, I knew the guys from our unit and maybe like one or two other randos, and that was it. That was it. Yeah,
man. And once you decided you were going, how long of a train up did you have before the day of the event?
Yeah, so it was about 4.5 months. I found out maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months out that like, hey, you're gonna go do this. So then I started kind of honing my training in, but the regiment's focus training is about 4.5 months.
And did you do mostly that, or did you kind of go rogue and do a lot of your own training?
I did all that. Like kind of like we were talking about, I just kind of make it up sometimes and just feel out how my body's feeling. So I kind of went kind of head over heels into it and just like, hey, I'm going to commit everything to listen to what the coaches have to say and doing it correctly. Now, obviously, if my body could handle a little bit more volume, I would. More's not always better. More's not always more. Sometimes it's less. But if I get some miles in on the weekend or do some more shooting on the weekend, or I would get on like the strider, like you kind of run, but you're on like a machine.
Oh yeah, thing. Yeah.
I don't know what it's actually called.
Like elliptical.
Yeah,
or something.
I'd get on elliptical for like 30 minutes a day probably, and just get some more volume and just get into that zone 2 heart rate for another couple hours a week beyond kind of what the what the training program was giving us, but that was about it.
Are you doing most training sessions with your teammate?
So the way the training is set up is you do kind of an initial tryout. They'll make initial cuts, and then you start the train up. And then after a couple weeks, you'll do an endurance event, which is, the first one was awful. Like, not what I came in super confident and just was destroyed after it. But you do like some running, some obstacle courses, some rucking, some carries, some kettlebell carries, some more obstacle courses, some kit running. I think we covered 20, 25 miles that day. And that's like kind of your first big kind of notch on your belt. And then after that, you'll build up to another endurance event or two, and then we'll do a mini competition. So the mini competition, the first one's about a day, and it's designed to just be the first day of BRC pretty much. And that one you do all by yourself. So that creates like a kind of interesting feel, but I think it's really good because then you're able to learn a lot of the skills by yourself, and you're not relying on somebody else to, hey, this is your role and this is my role, but you're both able to kind of do both roles, whether it's combat casualty care, setting up a mortar tube, or shooting, or whatever it might be. And then you build up, do a couple more endurance events, and then kind of near the end of that second block, I guess, you get assigned a partner, and then you do the second mini competition with your partner. And that's kind of like your first real trial run. Got it. And then from there you start kind of tapering down the volume and just sharpening the knives, getting squared away on everything. And then you go into the competition. Competition itself, should have mentioned this earlier, but it's about, they like to say it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. I think it's like 100%, and then 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, which I'll explain in a second. But so it's supposed to be 1/3 physical, 1/3 technical or tactical, and then 1/3 shooting, or marksmanship. Really the reality is the physical piece bleeds into all of it. I mean, you'll see some guys who are world-class shooters, and by day 3, they're sluggish and they're missing targets.
Smoked. Yeah.
So it's the physical, and that's like, I got that from Micros. He's like, it's 100% physical. And then after that, it's, kind of, that's not an exact quote, but I just kind of made it up. But, you're kind of focusing on those, all of those pieces of the pie, obviously physical being the biggest. But there's some good ways to work that in. So whether it's like, we'd shoot, but before we'd maybe like run a mile or two, or run to the range, or do an obstacle course, and then go shoot after that, just to get the heart rate elevated a little bit, just to be a little bit fatigued. But yeah, my partner and I, we were doing a lot of, to your point about like sticking to the training program, we were sticking to the training program physically, but, we do all the stakes. So like the technical and tactical tasks with the teams, we do all the shooting with them too. And then I was resourcing a bunch of we'd shoot for hours and hours and hours a day.
Just all those reps.
Yeah. Or like, and then even, we were talking about last night, is like, wake up at 5 a.m., get to the gym at 6, do your first training session, have breakfast, maybe do another training set, like do another physical training session if you had it. If not, go out and start doing stakes or start shooting, shoot for the rest of the day, get done. We'd go shoot more.
Crazy.
Yeah. Get home at like 6 p.m. and then I'm like helping put the boys down. Maybe Hannah would argue with that. Maybe not as much as I should have helped, but, and then like dry firing in the living room, reading, watching videos, trying to study up and like get squared away, and then wake up and do it the next day again.
That's super interesting. I didn't realize that, because that is like a full-time job of a professional athlete, the way that you guys were training for BRC.
Yeah. Like I was talking with some buddies about it, and it's, you feel like a professional athlete, which is really cool. To some extent, but it's also a really tough thing to kind of leave. Yeah. But it was awesome. Yeah. And you're dialing everything in, and you're doing your warm up, and the coaches are walking around. Hey, how's that ankle feeling? Is it still bugging you? Is it feeling a little bit better? Hey, take it easy on this. Do a little bit more of this today, whatever. And everybody's, the cool thing is, it comes with a lot of pressure from the unit, because they expect you to perform, and this is the 3rd year in a row that we've won it. So there's definitely a lot of pressure, like keep the trophy where it belongs, so to speak.
That is a lot of pressure.
Yeah. But it's also like, people are willing to sacrifice some of their time or some of their resources or, whatever to help get you where you need to be. And I mean, that's like the biggest thing to me is I was like the vehicle of all that, like I was just like the vehicle of all those guys, like training me, pouring into me, spending time with me to like help me get to the goal. Like it wasn't me, it was them, like
full team
pouring into me to like help me get there,
That's awesome.
Whether it was like an NCO working all day and then he's like, hey, I got to leave for an hour to go down to the range and like coach this guy who has no idea how to shoot for an hour or two. Or like, hey, we like this Ranger squad's going to ergo a couple rounds and you can have an extra 500 rounds, like go shoot, things like that or an armor coming in late to give us some weapons and let us go shoot and come back and let us turn them in. So it's like very much a team effort and everybody kind of rallies around you to help you succeed. But it's also a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Everyone's supporting you for the trophy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What were you guys doing for a lifting program?
Yeah. So there's very little lifting in the competition. I think, you got to move some Skedcos with rescue ranges or dummies in them that are pretty heavy and awkward. And there's, generally an ACFT mixed in. So you're doing a little bit of deadlifting. But there's very little like conventional lifting throughout the competition. They've done some like strongman events or stone carries, things like that. And obviously a lot of it's grip strength, being able to, you run with a litter or run with water cans, put them down, you're able to shoot or do a cognitive task or something like that. So that's really important. But generally about 2 to 3 days a week, we would lift, a nice warm up, core focused, and then a lot of compound movements, with some like stability stuff, whether it's single leg or, single arm or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that your climbing background really helped you perform well?
Yeah, I think so. I think, the confidence like to be on a climb and to continue on, you have to have a lot of confidence to keep going, confidence in yourself and also confidence in your partner, especially if you're rope climbing. But I think also just like getting into the flow state and being focused. Like there's very few things I've felt that, like hyper focused about in life. Climbing is always one of those things when I'm climbing, I feel hyper focused. Like there's nothing else going on in my mind.
Yeah.
And that's how it was a lot of time training, but especially those 3 days during BRC. Like I never thought 3 days with next to no sleep and, shitty food, I would feel in the flow state for 3 days straight. But I really felt, we had some hiccups here and there, but I felt like I was in the flow state the whole time, kind of just, same thing as climbing.
That's awesome.
I think the coordination too, like doing a lot of obstacle courses and things like that, the coordination from climbing helped a ton.
Yeah. And a ton of grip strength too. So what did it feel like showing up the day of the event?
Yeah. So you do the way it's set up is they do 4 days on the front end. That's called Competitors Week. So you show up, you do kind of your in processing, you get some briefs from some of the commanders of, hey, here's our expectations of you guys as competitors and whatnot. But then you also get the task condition standards of every event. So every event that you're going to be doing, they walk you through, here's what you're going to be doing, here's what's going to be expected, and here's how you're going to be graded, right? So that's, to me, that's where the competition starts, is like day one showing up with a notebook and like you get your competitor's handbook and like you're asking good questions. You're making sure that you're dialed on everything. And then, you're going to train as much as you can on what you understand the competition to be in the past, but there's going to be new things every year. And especially this year, they tried to make some changes to make it new and fresh, which was, I think, played to our advantage. And that was awesome seeing like, you got some veteran faces out there that have done it too, or they're on their third time and they're briefing how to tie a certain knot or, whatever, how to execute a range. And I'm like looking at them out of the corner of my eye and they're like, oh man, I'm like, yes, that's what I need.
Yeah. Something new.
Yeah.
And they're doing that every year, adding new elements.
Yeah. So that's really good. Cause like you're pretty dialed in on most of the stuff, but there's new changes that then you need to dial in that last week and make sure you're good to go. So that's really, really stressful.
So they brief you 1 week out. from the competition.
Yep.
And then you can make some final adjustments.
Yeah. And that's the goal, is to have, I mean, there's going to be surprises, but like as little adjustment as possible. But also being being mentally flexible to say like, hey, I'm not married to setting up the mortar tube this way. Like, I know how to do it. I know what I need to do, and I know how to do it fast. And like just knowing each partner's kind of area of responsibility, and then you can adjust from there, because it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And you're not going to, by watching YouTube videos from last year, 5 years ago, like, you're not going to have all the answers. So it's being able to adjust and like understand the core competencies of being able to treat a casualty, set up a mortar tube, shooting, whatever it might be.
And so then you show up a week later, and what event does BRC start with?
Yeah, so you start on a Friday morning. You get there at like 3:30. I didn't sleep at all the night before, and this is actually funny. I got sick. Like my son, of course, got sick, and I was like, "This is the worst thing that could possibly happen," because I know I'm going to get sick. Yeah. Oh. And it was like, I know I'm going to be gone all weekend. I'm not just going to be like, hey, Hannah, you take the boys and like sleep in another room. And I guess we had one boy at that point, but she was pregnant. I'm like, sleep in another room. I'm going to stay away from you and not get sick. So I ended up getting a little bit sick and had some, sinus was really clogged. I woke up that morning at like 3:30 or whatever and took a nasal decongestant. But it was one of those like packages where you've got the daytime and the nighttime.
Oh, yeah.
And at like 3 a.m, and I hadn't slept at all, because you're just, the gears are just turning all night long. I took a PM nasal decongestant, and I had so much adrenaline. I didn't even realize that I had taken a PM nasal decongestant until the end of the competition.
Dude.
And I saw the package like laying in the bathroom.
That's crazy.
I was like, there's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. But that was just like how high the adrenaline was. And my parents were in town for the competition. So like my dad drives me to the competition. I didn't say a word to him, and it was fun. He's a police officer, and he's like pretty, at least his music taste is very, very conservative. And we like, I don't think we listen to any music, maybe like NPR on the way in or something.
There's no like hype jams or anything?
No, but then we're like rolling up to the, where Ranger School is, where the competition starts. I was like, hey, Dad, I got to put something. And I put on like the worst, most inappropriate rap song. I was like, Dad, just like plug your ears. I need this for a second.
Well, you got to have a hype song.
Yeah. And then you come in and, everybody's getting their numbers and like kind of final things. You're getting briefed on, hey, here's how it's going to go. We're going to run out, and, we're going to, do the national anthem here, and then you're going to get your team photo, and which we blew right past. We like just kept running through and like, hey, you got to do a team photo. Like, we don't care. We're focused on something else right now.
Yeah.
So it's like extreme tension, and like everybody's nervous. Everybody doesn't know what they're in for, and you're kind of like eyeing everybody else up, seeing how everybody else feels, making awkward jokes, just nervous.
Bathrooms are getting pounded.
Oh yeah. And then the final gun goes off, and it's just like, okay, you're here now. Like, this is what you've been working for. So the first event was it was about somewhere between 7.5 and 8 mile run. On the way out, on both ways, you were wearing a kit, about 20 pounds. So you ran out, and then at the turnaround, you got a 60-pound sandbag, and between the two, you got to carry that all the way back.
That's brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
60-pound sandbag run, 7 miles.
Yeah. And so the strategy generally is like, I guess I'm sharing this for future competitors maybe, but our strategy is different anyway. So the general strategy is like, you want to be like, if you want to win the competition, you want to be in the top kind of percentile. So because the rest of the day, that's your first mass start event. And the rest of the day, you're going to be somewhat grouped with those people that are in the top of the pack. So you're going to see how they shoot. You're going to see how they do obstacle courses. You're going to see how they do the ACFT or whatever else you're doing that day to some extent. So you want to kind of group yourself with those top guys, but you probably don't want to go out and make a statement and just blow it out of the water on the first event. But we got to the turnaround, we were feeling good, and we're like, I looked at my partner and we're like, hey, let's blow it out of the water. Let's destroy these dudes.
Yeah.
So we blew it out of the water, came back, we put the sandbag down, stopped at the finish, because, it's based on placing, not time. So put the sandbag down, ate a little bit, And we're like hearing people, because there's like, it's like at the end of a race, people are all lined up and they're like, man, I can't believe, like, that was a bad decision. I can't believe they did that.
Because you got to wait for event 2. You can't just go there.
No, you go right into event 2. But we waited at the finish line until the next team was the second place team. At that point, it was right up on us, picked up the sandbag, walked across, and then you get ushered right into the next event. So that gave us a little bit of rest, but also like, and one of the previous winners came up to me either right after that event or later that day, and he's like, hey man, brave strategy. I don't think I would have chosen that, but that's a brave strategy.
Going out hot.
Yeah. So it's like, a little dangerous to make that kind of first move and like go all out. And you also make a statement too, because then people are like, oh man, that's, maybe that's a team to watch.
Yeah.
But I think it gave us a lot of confidence. And then it was like, okay, now we got to like uphold that for the rest of the weekend.
And you're still feeling good.
Yeah. So then you go into a run, swim, run. We ran, 2 miles, swam 600 meters in boots and uniform, and then pick up some water cans and run 2 miles back up. Then you do an obstacle course. Then we went straight into the ICFT, which is, deadlift, push-ups, ball throw, sprint
like
drag carry. Yeah. And then a 2 mile run at the end. You finish that, you do like a urban obstacle course, which is like some shooting, some kind of more tactical level obstacle course stuff.
And there's score in each event.
Yep. So each event is scored, but then it's also weighted. So, and nobody knows the weights. So you don't know if, it could be a weight of 5 or 6, it could be a weight of 1.
Yeah.
There's no way really to know. You could guess on like, hey, if this event only takes 30 seconds or a minute, maybe it's a weight of 1, but who knows? It could be a weight of 4. It could be a weight of 5.
No one knows.
No one knows. And so really, our strategy, I think there's some guys that'll kind of give and take as you go through the weekend. Our strategy was like, hey, we're going to blow everything out of the water to the best of our ability.
Like,
and obviously we fell totally short on some of them. Like the rope bridge, we like tied these Swiss seats, like a little harness pretty much made out of cordelette. And we tie them, and mine was like totally messed up. And the ranger instructor just kept looking at us. He's like, nope, not good. Time's still running. Nope, not good. Time's still running. And we were like, man, this is bad. We burned like 2 or 3 minutes just doing that.
Just retying.
Yeah. But so we didn't blow every event out of the water, but to the best of our ability, it was like, hey, we're going to go out and give 110% on every single one and just see where the chips lie. So that was our strategy.
What were
which it wasn't a strategy.
Just winging it.
Yeah.
What were the new events this year?
There's a lot of new twists. Like we shot 240s off of, it's called a Steed, which is like, it's really like a electric powered wheelbarrow. There was different combat casualty care lanes. Usually it's like in a certain spot. And they kind of run you through a lane that happens every year. So that was really new. But the biggest thing that was new this year is day 2 is all downtown Columbus in a stadium, which was, I thought, really cool. It's, a little bit of a branch off from what they've done for the past, I don't know how, 30 some odd years. But it was really neat, and families were able to come down and watch, and you're like down in the stadium. Granted, you're getting cooked by the Georgia sun. But,
oh man.
And usually the second day is, some physical spikes, but it's not a kick in the nuts. And this year, like we were talking about last night, I think it was 26-minute, AMRAP of doing 50 calories on the assault bike, each of you pushing a sled, carrying, doing a kettlebell carry, putting a bunch of sandbags over the wall, and then doing a 500 meter row for both of you. And you're doing this in kit too.
For 26 minutes.
And then you run back and do that again for 26 minutes. And
that one sounded like a smoker.
Yeah. And granted, we'd done, so before the night road march, it's like what a lot of people don't talk about really is like the night events, but the night events are like real make or break. And that's like where I think people really make their money, because, during the daytime, your family's there, spectators are there, you're all excited. And the night it's just you and your partner, and you're just like having a bad time, So we did 20 some odd miles with a bunch of ranges and obstacle courses and whatnot the first day before we even started the night road march. The night road march this year was a little over 20 miles on some kind of unforgiving terrain in Fort Moore, Georgia. And then the whole second day is usually a little bit more kind of technical, tactical, proficiency based, which it still was this year, but there was some really big kind of effort spikes during that second day this year. And then you roll into a nightland navigation where you're trudging through the woods and just really, really having a bad time. No light. You're just looking at your compass and keeping a pace counting and trying to find a place that's far away.
No headlamps or anything?
No. You can do a map check with a red lens if you're laying on the ground, but that's it.
Dang.
No white light, no walking with a light on. It's purely. So we were just like, I slammed my rifle against a tree a couple times. There's lots of cussing, lots of yelling at each other. Maybe not at each other, but just like at the woods. We were yelling at the woods.
What are the rules on food?
Yes, you get a certain amount of MREs. I think it changes from year to year, but you get a certain amount of MREs and then that's it. And so on like the final day of Competitors Week, I think is on Thursday, they give you your MREs and they're like, hey, take what you want to take. Don't take what you don't want to take. And that's it. That's your food for the weekend. So you got to pack it properly and where you need it and where it's efficient to get to. And I mean, that's another thing is you're fueling with MREs the whole time. It's not like you're getting goos and chews and gels and bananas and candy and everything else. It's like,
that's a pain.
Hey, here's a terrible, like chocolate peanut butter cheese spread. Like, and that's what you've got after, whatever event. So
did you guys run out?
No, not at all. I was nervous about that. But we were really intentional with fueling for the first 2 days, really. And on the third day, it was just like, just trying to keep stuff down and just trying to keep eating. But I felt like, I don't know the science behind it, but I felt like we were in a good spot and we had like done the fueling that we needed to throughout the weekend to kind of get to the third day. And so I was just eating what I could, but I had a ton left over. So I was actually afraid I was going to burn through all of it. And some dudes do. And they're like begging the ranger instructor, just like, hey man, can you give me some? They're like, nope, you got what you got. That's on you.
Oh yeah. You would not want to mess that up.
No, not at all.
What do you feel like was the hardest event for you guys?
I think the hardest event was nightland navigation. Because a lot of times they'll do it on the roads. So it becomes more of like like an orienteering foot race, really. But this year it was, hey, you're getting dropped off in one of the 4 quadrants, and then you're just going to stay away from roads. You'd get road killed and get a massive penalty if you were within, I think it was 20 meters or 25 meters of a road. So we like steered completely clear of roads. And so you're just trudging through the woods. And that was a mental battle going through that. And the way we and you're really focused too. So you're not feeling how you should. Especially if you're the point man and you're watching your compass, you're thinking about your pace. And, this is the second night that you haven't slept for and you've done, I don't know, 60, 70 miles probably at this point or more sometimes.
Yeah. Smoked.
Yeah. So you're done for, and you're carrying a rucksack the whole time. It's not like you're going out there with a weapon and like some snacks and some water. Like you got a, I don't know, 50, 60 pound ruck maybe, with your helmet in there, and you got your huge, super heavy weapon that you're carrying around, and Can you guys grab water whenever you want?
Yeah,
I mean, that one was like kind of weird. You had to get to one of your points to grab water, but there's water pretty much whenever you need it. Mm-hmm. But you got to think about what you're eating to make sure you're getting enough electrolytes with it, because I'm pretty sure a lot of dudes on the night road march flush electrolytes and they just get in a really bad spot.
Too much water.
Mm-hmm.
And through like your childhood and your climbing in college and then into BRC, do you think that you have like a unique mental toughness philosophy that is helping you get through some of these tough nights and tough situations?
Yeah, I think like, maybe this is like a different perspective, or maybe it's not a perspective. I don't know. But to me, it's like, I wasn't thinking about like being tough or like suck it up or stop. Like I was focused on one thing. Like from the start of Competitors Week till the end of day 3, like I came there to win, and that's what we wanted to do. So it's like, I don't care if my legs hurt. I don't care if I just rolled my ankle on nightland navigation. We still have 4 more hours of Nightland Nav to go. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the only thing that matters is winning, you know? But I think beyond that, it's like, especially since I've been in regimen and since I've like doing BRC, is that kind of underdog mentality, you know, because it's like, hey, there's the infantry guys and they're like, oh, we're so cool. We're like the guys, you know, and you're just a logistician. It's like, okay, well, let's like go do a physical competition, or like, let's, you know, test on something, like, and let's see who comes out on top. So it's like that underdog mentality.
Yeah.
I was like thinking about it the other day. I think I just have always tried to view myself in that way, whether that's the truth or not. Just like think about myself as the underdog and think about like, okay, I got to go out and prove myself, you know, and not like, hey, I need to do this for conservation of my ego, but like I need to do it because I want to show myself that I can do it and like prove it to other people that I can do it, I guess.
Yeah, that's a strong one. The underdog mentality is like, they say like the hungry dog runs faster.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty strong, powerful tool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like that's, especially going into BRC, that's who, I mean, I'm the first logistics officer to win it. I'm sure there's been 1 or 2 others that have done it in the past. I don't know how many, maybe 1 or 2. But the first one to win it, we were one of the first teams to have, you know, maybe one of the second or third team to have done it with 2 brand new guys. My partner is a specialist, which, you know, he's only been in the Army like 2.5 years.
Crazy.
You know, and then we go out there and everybody's like, man, this like logistics captain and this like specialist has been in for 2 years. They're just going to fall apart.
Yeah.
I was like, no, we're going to do our best.
What was his background?
I don't know, just like maybe his parents like fed him like PEDs all growing up and like not peanut butter and jelly. I don't know.
Just a freak.
I think it might have been. So his dad was like if I'm remembering right, his dad was a college football quarterback or something. And he's just one of those people that's an absolute freak, but he's also got another gear. I mean, he's just like dead focused on whatever it is, you know, it's
ultra
like
competitive.
Yeah. It's like, hey, we're going to write 100 words as fast as we can. He'd be like sharpening his pencil and like taking deep breaths, getting ready to go. You know, like that's the kind of person he is. But yeah.
Did you guys get to a point in the 3 days where you knew you had a solid lead? You're like, we're crushing this thing.
Yeah. I think like we didn't, so they'll release the standings every once in a while. And you don't know by how many points. It's just like, hey, here's first, second, third, down to 36 or 16 or whatever. So you have no idea how far ahead you are or how far behind you are or anything else. But I think we were just focused on one event into the next and not focused on like, hey, we got to win this one or we got to do this or we got to pick up here or whatever. But Night Land Nav was not our strongest event. I don't think it was our worst. I think like if I had to bet, we were probably like a middle of the pack finish on Night Land navigation. But like we didn't perform how we knew we wanted to and how we knew we should have. So at that point we woke up on day 3 and we were still in first place. And I was like, man, if we're still in first place after like what we felt like was a really terrible showing, not knowing how anybody else did, but
yeah,
what we felt was pretty bad.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, we're in a good spot. And it was funny because like we got maybe an hour or 2 or something to like lay on the cots that night before we went out for day 3, and I didn't sleep a wink. I just was like doing the math in my head, which is like an English major doing math in my head, which is why when we were working out this morning, I kept stopping the treadmill. So I was like, I can't do the running math to like figure out the time and the distance.
Time and distance.
No way.
Yeah.
So anyway, like doing that level math, like beer math in my head, I was like, hey, we've got a stretch shoot. We've got an obstacle course. We've got, what else was it? Like a mass start run. And then we've got CWSA, which is like, that's like the cool one that's in all the videos, like the guy running across the thing with the Ranger tab. You climb down the rope, touch the Ranger tab, drop off. It's like a big zip line down. I knew we were like top 5 finishes on all those. If we performed well, like if we shit the bed, like, yeah, we could have gotten last place, but I was pretty confident that we would be top 5 finishes on all those. Just seeing guys throughout the weekend and knowing like, because my partner and I took numbers for everything. Like every time we trained, whether it was like doing an obstacle course or doing a range or like we took numbers for everything. So we knew where we were at. we knew we were out, we were smoked. And a lot of times we do like an endurance event, like I was talking about. And the other guys would like, okay, it's time to go home and like get some chow. And we'd like have a quick protein shake and go to the range and just like try to do all those things when we were smoked.
Yeah.
And then get those numbers while we were smoked. So I was doing the math in my head and kind of like, hey, you know, if we do what we're supposed to today, like we're good.
That's crazy.
And then we had this is like the penultimate like Ranger NCO. He actually runs the RASP2, like the selection and training for all the officers and senior NCOs. But he comes up to me, we're doing the obstacle course. We did a press-it climb, which is like the worst thing ever. It's like what's that machine again?
The Versa climber.
Yeah, it's like doing the Versa climber as hard and as fast as you can with ropes, but they're like cutting into your hands and the back of your legs. It's awful.
That's awful.
So we did that into a big obstacle course I think it's like 3/4 of a mile or a mile long. And we're running up the hill and finishing that. And I'm like feeling really sorry for myself. My legs hurt and I can't move any faster than I'm moving. And he looks at me, I'm like laying on the ground afterwards. And he's like, get the fuck off the ground. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Do you want to win or do you want to just lay here on the fucking ground and think about how your legs hurt?
Dang.
And I was like, okay, it's like time to flip the switch.
Yeah.
But then he came up to me a little bit later and he's like, yeah, I heard a rumor that you guys had won like halfway through day 2, but like, I just needed to give you some extra steam.
He knew you guys were in the lead.
Yeah. So we had done pretty well, but you know, it's like, you don't know. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the competition. Like you don't know where you're standing, and people say it's like the Olympics of the military. And I think it is. Like there's no competition in the military that compares. Like there's no competition that's as difficult. Mm-hmm. But it's like one thing in the night, and you're getting tested on 30 plus events. So it's not like, hey, I'm going to go run a 50-yard dash and see how I finish. It's like, I'm going to go out here with these other dudes who are like really highly motivated, all Ranger qualified, really good dudes. They're giving it their all. I'm going to give it my all. And like, you're going to see how it shakes. Man. You know?
And the strength, endurance, and the tactical skills all combined. You can't just be good at one thing.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, if you were the most fit dude out there and you couldn't shoot, you're going to lose the competition. Or if you're, an unbelievable shooter and you can't hang fitness wise, you're going to lose the competition. So you lose or win the competition in a lot of different spots.
What's like the grand finale event on day 3?
So the grand finale was like the coolest thing ever. So, Colonel Ralph Puckett, who's a Medal of Honor recipient from Korea, he comes every year. He's still very, very ingrained in the Ranger culture, and then big things like that. So he came out and he was on a golf cart with General Grange's. So the competition's named after David E. Grange, who's a general. His son was grew up a Ranger. I can't remember I think he was like a full bird colonel or a general. He was there, and then his grandson also was in Ranger Regiment. So it's like that lineage. But General Grange's son was there. Colonel Puckett was there. There was Sergeant Major Payne, who's another Medal of Honor recipient, was there. And they kind of, Colonel Puckett talked to us for a little bit, and that was like a pretty emotional moment because that's your last mass start event. So you finish like the CWSA, the kind of going down the rope and zip line and everything else. You finish that and you have a little bit of a hold for maybe 30, 40 minutes, and they bring everybody together, put you on a bus, and then he talks to you for a little bit. And that was like really neat and pretty emotional. And you're like, man, I've like made it to the end. And then you run, I think it was like a 5K with a weapon and a kit this year.
Run in.
Yeah, which we took off. We're like, hey, we're going to like kick the door in on this one. And we did for like a mile. Oh. And there's a team that finished second. They're just like unbelievably talented runners. Like one of the guys was on the CAPT team. It's like the Army Olympic team that all trains in Fort Collins and whatnot. I mean, they're just freaks of nature.
Yeah,
and they caught us.
Endurance runners.
They caught us at like, I don't know, mile 2 or like 2.5 or something. And we were just like, we don't have it in us. We can't win. But so that was like the only event that we were a little sad about, but they, well earned on them to push out and win that one. Cause that was rough after 2 days. But then it's really neat because you come into the National Infantry Museum and there's flags up and your family's there and, you know, everybody's congratulating you and you cross the finish line. You're like, damn, we're done.
Bunch of spectators too, right? And like TV crews and stuff.
Yeah. So, and then it's like, man, I get to drink a beer and like eat a meal and hang out with my family. This is awesome. Like, I don't even care where I place. Well, I do, but like, you know, you're just pumped to be done at that point. So that was like a really cool and kind of symbolic ending. And that's usually how it ends. You'll get, you know, kind of a speech from somebody important, and then do a couple mile run to finish.
How long after the finish before you guys figured out that you'd won it?
Yeah, so they do a super supper afterwards, which is they invite like all the major commands whose people are competing and that have finished the event. My whole family was there. My wife and Emmett were there. That was really cool. I had some insider information of somebody that came up and he's like, hey, you guys did very well. And, you know, told me that we had won it. But at that point, it's like, it's not official. You don't know. And so we were going back and forth and
doing math still. Probably.
I mean, I was like, hey, it is what it is. Like we did our best. It is what it is. But my partner's like, did we win? Do you think we did it? How do you think we did? Do you think because of this?
Oh, that'd be killing you. Just waiting.
But you so you like do a survey of like, well, first you would get a medic check. And that was like, hey, are you okay? Yep. And I was just like, give me the strongest painkiller you have. And it was something prescription, but the dude gave me something prescription. I was just like, man, I feel amazing. Like pain in the knees went away.
Yeah. What was killing you?
Yeah. Knees, ankles, back, you know, more than anything that was just like that like muscle soreness. That's just like, I mean, you wake up day 2 and you're on, or you get to the night road march and you're on like some sore legs that are just shot. Oh. And like that feeling of just giving your all on really sore legs was rough. So just to get like a little painkiller in me, I felt amazing. But then you have to like sit down and you do a survey for like how the competition was and what could be improved and whatnot, which is great because it's like a captive audience and it's very fresh in your head. But it's just killing you. You're like, man, can we just like get out? And then you go to super supper and you're eating and you're hanging out with your family and telling your war stories about the weekend and whatnot. But you're like, man, can we just like cut to? And then the way they do it is they go 16-1, and it's like pretty slow, to be honest, because they're like, hey, this team has won because there's a bunch of really awesome sponsors. Oh,
it takes forever.
Yeah, the National Ranger Association kind of oversees it and kind of corrals all those sponsors, but there's a ton of sponsors, and so they'll be like, this person got a Right in the Rain notebook, got 3 hats, got 2, you know, whatever, right? And they got 14th place. And you're like, man, can we just please?
That's brutal.
Yeah. So then they finally announced us, and that was a cool moment. And then the next day they do the official ceremony where you get to hold the weapon up and, you know, you stand on stage and everything else. Everybody claps.
Did you win a pistol?
Yeah, I won a couple pistols.
That's awesome.
I'll have to show you a picture of it. It's like, it's beautiful. It's made by SIG and it says Rangers Lead the Way on one side. It has your team name or like your team number and your names on the top. And on the other side, it says, you know, BRC 2023, and it's got Ranger tabs embossed on either side. It's awesome. A beautiful weapon.
That is awesome.
SIG was very generous with a couple weapons for us.
That's incredible.
Great. Yeah.
How'd you feel the next few days?
I didn't feel bad. Like I don't know if have you been to Cookout? Okay. Well, when you're in Georgia, you got to go to Cookout. I was like, hey Dad, because my thing like throughout the competition was one Coors Light a week and sometimes 2, but usually one like Cookout milkshake a week. And they're like thick milkshakes with like Snickers, Oreos, like as much as you want in it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want a Coors Light and I want like the biggest, nastiest Cookout shake of all time.
Oh, I bet that was good.
So like after the dinner, I just sat on the porch. I hadn't even showered or anything. I smelled probably like death. And I'm just like eating this Cookout shake. And I felt great from that point on. But
dang.
Yeah. And then the next morning, it's like, it's not a super early wake up, but I think you have to be there at like 8 or so. We had to be there at 7:30 or 8 to take pictures, but I was out of it. I was like
zombie.
Man. But I think you don't really like come down from that adrenaline high until like probably like Monday afternoon. And then you're like, oh man.
Just done for.
But I think it was like, you know, it's a testament to the training, but I felt pretty recovered. I'd like started training later that week and did a race like a week and a half later. And so it felt pretty good, but that was all due to the training,
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wasn't Mike the guy you were telling me about that ran like 10 miles every morning at like a 7-mile pace?
That's the rumor anyway. Yeah. I couldn't do that.
No one's verified it
Definitely. Yeah. I'd have to look at his Strava to verify, but I'm certain he did.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But it's like that. And that's some of the, that was like the thing in the back of my head too, is you look at these dudes that are just freaks,
Yeah.
and they're the guys that have won it. And you're like, man, I don't know if I can measure up to that. And a lot of guys that are like, were D1 athletes or ran, cross country in school or like done all this crazy stuff. And you're like, man, can I like level up to where they're at and do the competition, do well?
Yeah.
But yeah,
you guys pulled it off.
Yeah, we did. But and I think a lot of it was just like being able, like back to the mental toughness point, being able to focus, because it's, we've been talking, I know nothing about hunting. And so like, if I butcher this, please like steer me in the right direction. But, it seems very similar to hunting to me, because it's like, you just absolutely gas yourself. And then you get into a situation where you're like, you've got to perform cognitively, whether it's shooting or whether it's night stakes and you're breaching a door, you're doing a reconnaissance lane. But then you have to like be really dialed in and be cognitively focused. And so it's like, you have to put everything else behind you, put on the back burner, forget about how bad your legs hurt or how heavy your pack is or whatever, and just like put it down and focus on the task at hand.
Yeah.
And I think being able to like flip that switch is really important. And that came from, I think, just being like focused on the goal at hand. But I think also it's like, taking it, one step at a time, and like not getting worked up about things. Like, maybe you just carried your pack over like 4 ridge lines and you just put it down to like see an awesome bowl.
Yeah.
But you gotta like take the wins and take the defeats and like keep going forward.
It's really similar from that perspective. I mean, I think that's why it's so helpful in training to redline in the gym on occasion. I mean, we were talking about it yesterday, but like we can easily overdo and get addicted to the high intensity crushers, but once or twice a week, I think has completely changed the game for a lot of people in the Mountain Tough community, because you realize where that red line is, you realize how far over it you can go. And then a lot of times you have the stress of, in our lab, we have the stress of like the team counting on you to perform in a lot of those workouts. And so you have to kind of like act like you're not that tired and put some of that stuff behind you. And then you still have to think while you're tired and make good decisions. And I think if you're not practicing some of that stuff in a training scenario, it's hard to pull it out on game day, which you see a lot of times in hunting situations, because if you bring a friend hunting or a guest or a visitor, a lot of times just the backcountry alone is starting to break them down mentally before anything has really happened. So we just had this happen last week where a friend came out to hunt with a guy from the office and got like emotional, and that breakdown started happening before anything stressful had happened, just because the backcountry and the weather and the heavy packs and the conditions and being away from home and friends and family and electronics, like already like his brain was overloaded before like a stressful emergency or shot had even like taken place. But what I've seen for sure in my personal experience is like when people are just replicating that to the best of their ability, like in a training scenario, like their life becomes a lot easier when things actually happen. And it's kind of just no big deal. And oftentimes like the real world scenario in hunting can be less traumatic than what you can make it in the gym. And so you can push yourself so hard in the gym that stressful hunting situation is just a non-issue. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think, maybe, and this is like some serious bro science here, but, maybe like pushing yourself to that limit, and almost less for sake of fitness gains, but more for the sake of that mental edge. Like I would have one buddy and we'd literally go do, like, preparing for this, we'd go do heat of the day runs in Georgia on a track under full sun. It's like, hey, let's go get after it. And like, you feel like you're going to die and you're not running nearly as fast as you think you are, but just like go do it. Or that workout I was telling you about, like we're doing a running in a plethora of obstacle courses, and, over 45 minutes or an hour, my heart rate average is like 185 and my high is like near 200,
Yeah.
And there's really no, especially for that duration, there's no real usefulness in my understanding for fitness gains, but like that gives you a mental edge to just to flip a switch, and you're like, man, this, then you're hunting, or then you're in a competition or on a deployment or whatever. And it's like, man, this doesn't hurt that bad. It doesn't hurt as bad as that other thing that I was doing, but I think also you gain a really valuable understanding of yourself as a person and athlete. And I think that's like, to tie some of those things together of, ranger school, of hunting, of training, it's like you learn where you're going to break, and like, I think that's what ranger school is all about, is it's like, are you going to break when you have like a heavy pack on you? Are you going to break when you're hungry? Are you going to break when you're tired? Are you going to break when you have like disagreements with somebody else on your team? Like, what's your breaking point?
Yeah.
And that's why it's a leadership school, not because like carrying a pack and like not eating food, not sleeping makes you a better leader, because it doesn't. But like getting to that point and finding out where you break is super valuable, I think, as a hunter, or as somebody in the military, or as like a person in a relationship or with kids or whatever, like finding like where those stress fractures going to happen, and how can I like prevent them or offset them. But also like, if I'm running up a hill, like I know I'm getting near the red line, and like I'm near the point of no return, and like, okay, I'm going to dial it back a little bit, or like, hey, I've got quite a bit more to give because we're almost to where we need to take this shot. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so true and accurate. And that's kind of how we have started to look at like because a lot of our challenge workouts are high intensity workouts from like a human performance perspective would get criticized for like too much volume. But most of the time we are looking for that mental edge and that mental hack. And I think one of the greatest things, in addition to what you said, that it teaches a lot of people is there's a lot of those kind of situations, or those training environments, like running in the heat, where you actually feel like you might die, like your body's telling you you're going to die. But the thing that it teaches a lot of folks is after you're done with that run and you go into the locker room or into your shower or into your house, and you realize that 20, 30, 15 minutes later, you feel completely fine and almost 100%. People grasping that concept where, like, even though I think I'm going to die right now, if I finish and get some water, then I'm going to feel completely 80, 90% within 10 to 15 minutes. It kind of changes their whole mindset, because without that mindset, they actually think they're going to die. But once they've like bumped up against that red line so many times, they realize that it does suck really bad. But if they take a few steps after they're done, they're going to feel completely fine. So I think that we've seen that play a huge difference in people's lives, where they realize like, this really does suck, but it's not going to be the end. I just have to get through it.
Yeah, it's not forever. And that was like one thing we faced on the night road marches. It kept dragging on. But it's like that realization of like, well, it's going to end sooner or later, and then we're going to feel better. Then we're going to get to eat some food. Then we're going to get to like reflect a little bit, think about what we have to do next, What's your perspective on like what that line is, like what's too much? Because in my experience, it took me a while to be able to get there as an athlete, to like understand what's too much, and some trial and error, some like injuries or, some setbacks, or like, you do one of those heat of the day runs and the next day you're like, man, the next couple of days you're cooked, like you're gassed.
Yeah.
So what's your advice on where that level is that you can start really pushing that, but then also like where's, what's enough and what's too much, do you think?
We've learned a lot about that over the last 6 years. And I think that what kind of the cycle of learning we went through is the high intensity crushers, whether it's long or short, can get pretty addicting. And so you get like the greatest like dopamine and cortisol release after those kind of workouts. And you can feel the difference between like a team-based high intensity and then going into like a good strength training session the next day, where like the strength training can feel really boring after a really good high intensity team-based competition workout. Or like you can also do it alone, where you're trying to strive for more calories than someone else or more meters than someone else off like a really good high intensity concept. But those can be so addicting because of like those hormone releases of pushing yourself that far, that we definitely went through a long cycle of overdoing it. And we still are kind of like battling against that fence of overdoing it. And I think programming wise now, like in the Mountain Tough app where the programs are being done across the world, most of that has been addressed, where the Mountain Tough community doing our training in the app is seeing like 1, maybe 2 of those workouts a week, mostly 1, with the second one being a different style. Yeah. And that's kind of where the science is leading today, is like it's a 72-hour recovery window after you touch zone 5. So if you're going to touch zone 5, you're not going to, from a human performance science perspective, want to touch it again for another 3 days. Us personally in the lab, we're always kind of like playing with those limits. Mm-hmm. And in the lab now, the limit that I think about a lot is like capacity. Is my capacity actually going up or down? And it's more like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, where it's just listening to your body and trying to understand if you're overtraining or not. But it's a slippery slope for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And I think like you bring up a great point of, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And that's one thing I realized in training up for the competition, particularly, is like, hey, we're going to do the press it climb, or we're going to do an RPAT all out, or we're going to do this really difficult ruck workout, or, like picking where you do it. And maybe it has more stress on your body, or maybe it beats your body down a little bit more, or maybe it's just a ski erg, and you're going to have little to no impact, but you're still going to get that kind of heart rate variance and really find that limit. And I think like one thing that was cool about the competition and knowing your body is this is the crappiest Garmin, it's like the crappiest Garmin watch ever. Yeah. And this is like my first smartwatch, because I used to always just use a Timex. Mm-hmm. And that's what you use like during Ranger School in the competition. Obviously you can't have a smartwatch, which I think is really awesome, because, I'm sure it's the same thing in hunting or in the backcountry. Like, yeah, you could have a heart rate monitor and have all your data and, hey, I'm not going above this, this heart rate, but like being able to understand your rate of perceived exertion and what your limits are. And like, whether it's lifting or, for the military, doing an obstacle course or running with kit and a weapon, or, hiking up a hill, or like whatever it might be in the backcountry. Like if you can know what your RPE is and like where you need to be and not go over that threshold, I think it's really valuable. And obviously data can kind of cheat and do that for you, but I think it's so much better to do it yourself, because there's other variances too of hydration or nutrition or weather or whatever it might be. So you're not always going to have the perfect data.
Yeah. Yeah, we're big believers in that too, and it's a little counterculture right now, but we chat about it all the time in the office, and it's kind of like a very, very new athlete can really thrive off a lot of that data, because that data is keeping them hooked on fitness, or it's changing their sleep patterns. And then you get to a maturity point where you don't need that data anymore. And so it is something that we don't want to see people turn into a crutch, because you can get addicted to the data more than you can be paying attention to what your body is telling you. And a lot of times that data can be lying to you, especially when you're trying to build mental toughness, where it's gonna, even now, on this Garmin, it is pretty comical where we'll do something pretty basic in the gym, or we'll do something
72-hour recovery. Yeah.
We'll do something really basic in the mountains, and it's 72 hours. It's telling me 72-hour recovery all the time, which I'm certainly not going to do. So I think relying too much on this data is a huge mistake for sure.
Yeah, I guess if you're Eliud Kipchoge and you're going to go set, marathon records or something, and you've got all these coaches watching you, but for dudes in the military, a lot of them aren't that dialed, nor should they be.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most or all of your athletes, they're training to go out and do something, not to perform at one event, but to go and use it functionally.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to train that mind body kind of experience, I guess, or connection to understand where you're at, what you need to do, how you need to fuel, that's one of the most valuable things you can use in training, especially if you're doing any kind of endurance training.
Yeah.
Because then you can practically use that, and you're not, like you're saying, you're not using all those crutches. Mm-hmm. And maybe your watch dies in the backcountry, and then, are you screwed, and then you're zone 5 and all out of whack,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a really useful tool for someone who's trying to get started, or for someone who's trying to almost be that professional athlete in a controlled environment. But other than that, you got to be really careful with this technology.
Yeah. So how do you, what are your thoughts on how you dip your toes into it as a new or maybe not super experienced athlete? How do you dip your toes in that intensity without, putting yourself in a hole?
I think into the high intensity workouts without overtraining.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I realized over the last couple of years is everyone should be doing it and needs to incorporate it into their life. 'Cause for Mountain Tough, it is so much more of a lifestyle than a training program for a specific goal. And most of our consumers that have gone through our programs, they realize that pretty quickly, about 20 to 60 days in. And so they usually will purchase the Mountain Tough app, or a specific Mountain Tough program that they want to do through the app for a reason, such as they drew a Colorado elk tag and this is their moment to finally get in shape, or they have a big event in their life, a doctor told them to get in better shape, or there was some sort of crisis, which gets them to make the purchasing decision to start. And they usually are starting because of that tag or that hunt or that trip. But then they pretty quickly realize that it's way, way bigger than that. It's way bigger than that actual trip itself, because all of these things are so tied together with the mind-body connection. And so what happens is through the high intensity training and everything else, but the high intensity has a key component to them starting to be a better father and a better husband and a better friend and a better employee and a better boss. And it's very linked to them pushing their red line a little bit. Because if you're not pushing your red line at all in life, we've all seen people like that, or had friends and family like that, where generally small pieces of adversity push them over the top. So someone who is working like diligently on their mindset, it takes a lot to knock them down or stress them out. But someone who doesn't even think that part of them exists and has no focus on it, like the smallest thing in life could really stress them out. So it could be like what I've seen before, for example, is like a fake telemarketer call to someone who hasn't been working on their mindset. That's like a scam, could completely put someone over the top that isn't thinking about like their overcoming adversity and being resilient and having a strong mindset and how nothing can really take them down. Because I think what the high intensity training does teach people over time is that we are in control of our mindset. We are in the driver's seat. And that is a big switching point in a lot of people's lives, because a lot of people can go 20, 30, 40, 50 years or longer without ever realizing that they're actually in the driver's seat of their mind and their emotions. And it is kind of a completely different life between just living and thinking that our emotions are in control, and living thinking that we're in the driver's seat. And without manufacturing adversity, that is hard to do, especially in today's age, where like there isn't a lot of adversity in a normal day-to-day life in a high-tech environment. So I think you have to manufacture adversity to realize that you're in control of your mindset, and high-intensity training is like one of the best ways to do it. So people have to dip their toes into it. They have to do it. I think how they do that is I think for sure I would just have everyone start with 1 day a week.
Yeah, I think that's a solid place to start. And I guess it's like you could always do things that are, like there's little to no risk. Skier, rower,
Yep.
Assault bike, right?
Yep.
Like you could do something that's little to no risk, or even like a bunch of burpees. Like you do a bunch of burpees and carry like a sandbag, and that's going to be a pretty good red liner.
It doesn't take much.
No,
at all. Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Like, what are your thoughts on, because I've been reflecting on this too, like, as BRC winded down and it's like training like a professional athlete, and I'm getting in, 10 hours of cardio a week and 2 to 3 lifts a week and some obstacle courses and shooting and whatnot. How, like, what's your advice on juggling the two, right? Because it's like, if you want to just do a workout a day, that's awesome. And that's fantastic. But, you want to like get after it in the gym. You want to do some endurance training. You want to do some strength training. You want to like be a well-rounded athlete. And obviously that takes a lot of time. So like, how do you juggle work or running a company with having kids, with being in a marriage, with, trying to do all these other things, and like, what takes the driver's seat at what time, and how do you be okay with like, man, I'm skipping a workout today,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen make a difference from that question perspective lately, and this is like relatively new for me in the last 6 or 7 months, is, and Phil talks about this a lot, and it's the first time I've actually experimented it intentionally in my life. I've done a lot of it without thinking about it over the years, but the big thing for me now is like reevaluating that morning routine. And so I've all the way through college and into my 30s before founding Mountain Tough, I used to train like at 5 a.m. And then when Mountain Tough kicked off and kids were born and stuff like that, a lot of that went away. And just in like the last year, I've started to add some of that back, not like I was before, where that was my primary workout, but now it is more of like a morning routine. And I think it is a complete game changer. It definitely seemed to be having a huge impact in my life. And one of the reasons that it works so well for me where I'm at right now, but it also works for a lot of other people from this perspective is like the whole family is sleeping. So the whole family is sleeping. So it's like the perfect time to work on yourself without interrupting family time. So like family time for me has been like prioritized like 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Like everything has to be shut off. Work has to be shut off. And that time has to be all about like my wife and my 2 daughters. Cause like 5 to 9 p.m. is really the only time we actually have with our family. So, and that gets harder and harder. Like my girls are doing gymnastics now till 7 and then they go to bed at 9. So like those little windows just get like, they change and they get smaller and smaller. But for most people, like the family is going to sleep till like 6, 7, or 8. So sneaking out before them has been like this pretty game-changing opportunity, because I like waking up early anyways, but I can sneak in a lot of my endurance work at that time, because I like doing a lot of my strength training after I have some calories in the system. But it also is so much more connected into like the mental health as well. Because like you start your day with a win, you already have like one win under your belt. And then just getting that movement first thing in the day, like all the creative juices start flowing. So I'll find that just by moving, like let's say it's like a run in the morning, then you start thinking about like these people that you should have called that you haven't called back, like business ideas that come to you, because like all the same thing, like the dopamine and the cortisol are kicking off first thing in the morning. And so that I think is like one of the best hacks I've found in like the recent years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's like one thing that I've been struggling with as I've been on like, exiting the military and being on paternity leave is how do you juggle all those different things?
Yeah.
And especially without the structure, like you're so spoiled in the military to have like, hey, you have like assigned work time that you need to be here to work out. And especially in the Ranger Regiment, it's like, hey, you're assigned to be here and work out. But then on top of that, it's like, hey, I can dial the phone first thing in the morning at 6 a.m. and find 5 people that are going to run 10 miles with me,
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a dream. But then being with a family and being on your own, it's like, well, if you don't get it in the morning, then it's, hey, how do I fit this in while the kids are napping or if they're doing this or whatever? And then it's going to incur on something else. And
it gets hard.
You can get that win first thing in the morning, get flowing, get moving, and like have that, hey, I accomplished something today, and now it's like go conquer the rest of the day. And I think that's one huge thing that like, people can take as family members or, members of a community and, business or whatever.
Yeah. It's kind of it's just that golden hour where for a lot of people, it is difficult to wake up that early. So like if your family's up at 7, that might need to be 4, or if you're like, it's different for each person, but it definitely like that pain goes away of like changing your sleep cycle pretty quickly. I'd say like within 60 days, like it being hard to get up early versus it just being normal.
Well, and especially if you get on that, if you get on that routine as opposed to like, hey, I'm going to do it Monday through Thursday.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a couple of days. I'm going to sleep till 9, or sleep till 7 even.
Catch back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like with you, you're going to need to set another huge training goal on your calendar.
Yeah. That's been the tough thing is it's like, did the competition, did a race, did, a couple other things. And then it's like, okay, what's next? What am I training for now? So it's like, I'm excited to, for us as a family to get settled down and then kind of find those next goals, those next fitness goals to stay motivated for and find people to train with and whatnot.
Do you have any ideas yet?
I want to do some obstacle course racing because I'm not nearly fast enough. Like I'm going to get beat by high school cross country kids all week long, like it's their day job.
Like on marathons and stuff.
Even marathons, I'm going to get beat by like old dudes who've been doing it for X amount of years. So I think like my only edge is maybe some more like functional stuff. So I'm thinking I'm going to do some obstacle course racing. Like I'd love to get into doing some Spartan and whatnot. And then, we were talking about high rocks earlier.
I'd love to do a high rocks.
I think like, I need to work on some of the strength stuff. But I'd love to do that. And then I want to do some tactical game stuff. Cause that's, like that's really what we were doing stress shoots for, for training for BRC and during the competition all the time.
That has to be really similar to BRC, right? The tactical games.
Yeah, I'd say so. Cause a lot of it, there's some ranges during BRC that you walk up and it's like, hey, here's a pistol and 12 rounds and shoot the Texas Star as fast as you can. That's it. Like that's the range. But then a lot of them have some physical component, like you're assessing a casualty and then moving them, shooting, you're moving the casualty again, you're doing an obstacle course and shooting or whatever, right? Like there's some kind of physical aspect to get that heart rate high and then start shooting. Which has been awesome. I learned a lot about that, especially on like the shooting side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like being able to, I wonder if like the same thing goes for hunting, but being able to take those extra 10 seconds, or extra 15 seconds to just take a couple deep breaths. Cause like
get that heart rate to come down.
Yeah. You're going to take 3 seconds and you're going to miss the shot for sure. But if you take 10 seconds, you have a pretty good chance of making it, especially in like competitive or in BRC. I won't say competitive shooting because like I by no means am a competitive shooter, but in BRC it's like it might be a 20-second penalty for every missed shot. If you take 5 seconds or 10 seconds to calm it down, you're going to make the shot as opposed to just missing it right off the bat and then eating more time.
Does BRC have any far shots? Long distance?
They will from. We were kind of lucky because I'm not great. Like 200 meters plus, I'm not great. So I was like in awe when you said your daughter was like a 500 some odd shot. I can't believe that. Like your daughter would kick my ass on the range.
It was crazy. Yeah.
But there's like they'll do sniper rifle stuff ingrained in the competition from time to time. Or a lot of times there'll be like a weapons qual, which goes out to 300 yard or 300 meters. But this year, I think, most of the shooting is like 100 meters and in for the most part, maybe 200 meters and in.
Gotcha.
Just to get people through it a little bit quicker. It's a better spectator event. Like it's a better spectator event if you're like knocking down the Texas Star in a plate rack than if you're like shooting at and missing like a popper that's, 400 meters out.
Yeah. It's a little more exciting.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm stoked you came by the lab, man. It's cool to have you out here.
This has been awesome. I enjoyed working out this morning and, it's great having dinner last night and I'm stoked to do another workout.
Yeah. We'll do some high intensity now.
Let's get after it.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah.